Hello everyone and welcome back to Heal Please Heal Gaming. For the last few weeks I have been busy with a lot of real life circumstances and have finally had time to sit down, do some research, and deliver a pirate history video you all have been waiting for. I've been given quite a few requests, with the most being for one of the most notorious, well-known pirates named around, and his name was Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Very little is known about Blackbeard early on in his life. It is believed that Blackbeard died between the age of 35 and 40, and was estimated to be born around 1680 in Bristol, England. He was born as Edward Teach, or Edward Thatch, though Teach was primarily the name used throughout his documented existence, and therefore will be referred to as such. Edward Teach was an educated man, and during the 17th century rise of Britain's American colonies and the 18th century expansion of the Atlantic slave trade, Edward Teach was utilized as a merchant advisor and communicated with many of them in Bristol, England, as it became one of the largest ports during that time. Teach would eventually make passage to the Caribbean during the last years of the 17th century on a merchant ship. During the 18th century, Teach would operate from Jamaica as a privateer during the War of the Spanish Succession, and was claimed to be bold and courageous during the fight. Following the war, Teach would move to New Providence, which was an uninhabited island utilized as a base for pirates at the time. New Providence shores were shallow, not allowing the Royal Navy ships to navigate through, and therefore gave a sense of protection to the pirates. New Providence would be referred to as no city of homes, as it was utilized as a temporary shelter and refreshments for pirates throughout the Caribbean. Very few men lived on New Providence, while a majority of the population were transient. Teach was one of the few who lived on the island, and in 1716 joined the crew of Captain Benjamin Hornigold, who himself was a renowned pirate who operated from New Providence safe waters. Within the same year, Hornigold appointed Teach in charge of a sloop. Both Hornigold and Teach would set sail for the mainland in 1717, and would capture and seize many ships with their illustrious cargo, one of which was 120 barrels of flour, and another with 100 barrels of wine. It was during this time Teach was beginning to make the name for himself. In September of that year, Teach and Hornigold encountered Stead Bonnet, who was a military officer from a wealthy family, and had turned to piracy earlier that year. Bonnet's crew had become displeased with his command, and Bonnet appointed Teach the new captain of his ship Revenge and remained as a sailor. Their fleet, now growing, harbored 3 ships: Teach's Revenge, Teach's old sloop, and Hornigold's Ranger. They would capture 2 more sloops that year, adding to their fleet. Towards the end of 1717, Benjamin Hornigold was demoted from captain. It's unknown if Teach had anything to do with this, but Hornigold had decided to retire, and in June of 1718 accepted the king's pardon in New Providence. On November 28th, Teach's crew attacked a French merchant vessel off the coast of St. Vincent, with a broadside attack killing several members of the crew and thus forcing the captain to surrender. The ship was called La Concordia of St. Malo and was a large Guanaman carrying a cargo of slaves. After bringing the ship to port, they disembarked the crew and cargo and renamed the ship the Queen Anne's Revenge and equipped her with 40 guns. In late November, Teach and his crew attacked a well-armed merchant ship named Great Allen. After a lengthy battle, he forced the large ship to surrender and ordered her to move closer to the shore, where the crew and cargo were emptied off the ship. Teach would burn and sink the vessel, leaving the crew on the island. By December of that year, Teach would command the Queen Anne's Revenge, a brig, and a sloop harboring about 150 men split between the fleet. In December of 1717, Teach and his crew would capture a sloop named Margaret off the coast of Crab Island, and Captain Henry Bostock along with his crew were held captive for a few hours as they watched Teach's crew ransack their ship. Teach would allow Bostock and his crew back to the sloop unharmed and sailed off. Bostock would sign an affidavit of the events of Governor Walter Hamilton on St. Christopher Island, where he described Teach as a tall, spare man with a very black beard, which he wore very long. This is one of the earliest documented descriptions of Blackbeard prior to his well-known moniker. By May of 1718, Teach's fleet has grown to several ships strong, with the Queen Anne's Revenge being the largest of the fleet and awarded himself the rank of Commodore. Later that month, his flotilla blockaded the port of Charlestown in the province of South Carolina and would stop all vessels entering and leaving the port. About 5 or 6 days had passed and about 9 vessels were stopped and ransacked. One vessel in particular was the Crowley, that was headed for London and that harbored a councillor for the province of Carolina who was named Samuel Wragg. Teach took prisoner the crew and counselor and advised that his fleet required medical supplies from the colonial government of South Carolina, and if none were forthcoming, all prisoners would be executed with their heads sent to the governor. Rag would agree to this, and 2 pirates, along with a prisoner named Mr. Marks, would head to the land and seize the medical supplies and were given 2 days. Teach would move his flotilla along with the captured ships 5 to 6 leagues from land and wait for the supplies. Marks would not return within the 2 days and sent word to Teach that he required additional time. Teach would grant the reprieve for 2 additional days, but Marks and the 2 pirates would not return. Teach held a meeting with his crew and would send 8 ships towards the harbor. The town panicked, but thankfully Marks would return with the supplies, stated that he received the medical supplies within the original 2 days, but finding Teach's pirates proved to be difficult as they had gotten drunk and moved throughout town. Upon receiving the supplies, Teach was a man of his word and released the captives unharmed. While Teach and his crew were in Charlestown, they learned that several men-of-war ships were set sail to purge the West Indies of pirates. Teach had decided to take his flotilla northward along the Atlantic coast and to Topsail Inlet off the coast of North Carolina, where they intended to careen their ships and scrap their hulls. But on June 10, 1718, the Queen Anne's Revenge ran aground on a sandbar and damaged the ship beyond repair. Teach ordered several of his sloops to assist in pulling the ship back out, but by doing so, one sloop called the Adventure also ran aground and became damaged, leaving Teach with only 1 sloop and a captured Spanish sloop. During this time, Teach had learned of a royal pardon offer and confided in Bonnet, the original captain who appointed Teach as the new captain of the ship. Bonnet agreed and sailed to Bathtown, where he surrendered to Governor Charles Eden, accepting the pardon. Bonnet had traveled back to Topsail Inlet to collect his ship, the Revenge, and the remainder of his crew, with the intention to sail to St. Thomas Island. It was a surprise when he noticed that Teach had stripped his vessel of its valuables and provisions and had marooned his crew. Bonnet set out for revenge but was unable to locate Teach. He found his marooned crew and returned to piracy, only to be captured shortly after at the mouth of Cape Fear River. All but 4 were hanged in Charlestown. Teach and his crew would eventually receive their pardon from Governor Eden, with Teach settling in Bath, on the eastern side of Bath Creek and Plum Point. His pardon was shortly lived as he returned to piracy at the end of August, and in the same month the governor of Pennsylvania issued a warrant for his arrest, though Teach and his crew were already pirating in Delaware Bay, where he took 2 French ships leaving for the Caribbean. Teach would sail to Ocracoke Island and anchored his ships there, giving him a favorable vantage point to see ships traveling between the various settlements of northeast Carolina. This is where he met with Charles Vane, another English pirate. Vane was a well-known pirate who had rejected a pardon and was also hunted by Teach's old commander Benjamin Hornigold, who was at that time a pirate hunter. Teach and Vane spent several nights at the tip of Ocracoke Island with other notorious pirate figures such as Israel Hands, Robert Deal, and Calico Jack. While Teach and his new pirate crew got to know each other, there was concern growing around the neighboring settlements. The governor of Pennsylvania was particularly concerned and sent out 2 sloops to capture the pirates, which were unsuccessful. The governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood, was also concerned that many of Teach's former pirate crew were living amongst the region near North Carolina and issued a proclamation on July 10th, requiring that all former pirates to make themselves known to the authorities and give up their arms and not travel in groups larger than 3. Spotswood had very little faith in the ability of the Carolinians to control the pirates, and had suspected that they would be back to the pirating ways, disrupting the commerce once their money ran out. Spotswood would learn that William Howard, a former quartermaster of the Queen Anne's Revenge, was in the area and believed that he would know the whereabouts of Teach and his crew. He had Howard and his 2 slaves arrested, and following a lengthy legal battle, yes, there were legal battles back then, he would obtain information from Howard on Teach's whereabouts. Spotswood now knew the whereabouts of Teach and his crew, and financed the operation personally. He obtained the support of a few people looking to discredit the governor of North Carolina, and commanded Captain Gordon and Brand of the HMS Pearl and HMS Lyme to travel overland to Bath. Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the HMS Pearl was given command of 2 commandeering sloops and was ordered to approach the town from the sea. Maynard took command of 2 armed sloops and was given 57 men, 33 from HMS Pearl and 24 from HMS Lyme. Maynard would take the largest of the sloops and name it Jane, while the rest took the other ship referred to as Ranger, which was commanded by one of Maynard's officers, Mr. Hyde. The sloops moved slowly, allowing Brand's larger ship, the HMS Lyme, time to reach Bath in time. Brand also had with him several North Carolinians, such as the Colonel Moore and Captain Jeremiah Vale, sent to ease tensions and local objections to the presence of foreign soldiers. Moore would head into town to see the whereabouts of Teach, reporting back that he was not in town but expected any minute. Brand would also visit the governor's home, informing him of their presence. The next day, Brand set 2 canoes down Pamlico River to Ocracoke Inlet to scout the area of Teach's location. They returned 2 days later. Maynard's scouts would report that they found the pirates anchored in the inner side of Ocracoke Island on the evening of the 21st of November. It was decided that they would make an attack the following day, and stopped all traffic entering the inlet, preventing any warning of their presence and posting a lookout on both sloops to ensure Teach could not escape the sea. At the same time, Teach was entertaining guests and did not set a lookout. Israel Hands was ashore in Bath with 24 of his crew from the Adventure, and Teach also had a much reduced crew at this time. The following day, the 2 sloops entered the channel. A small craft was spotted by Adventure right away and fired upon. As the boat made a retreat, Teach would cut the anchor on Adventure and gave chase. As they were nearing, Adventure would turn their guns and fire on the 2 sloops. The attack was devastating, as Maynard lost almost a third of his crew from that one attack. About 20 on Jane were either wounded or killed, and 9 on Ranger. Hyde too was dead, with his second or third officer either dead or suffering from serious injury. Accounts of the attack are limited, but what is assumed is that the gunfire was present shortly after, with a bullet penetrating and breaking the jib sheet off Adventure, leaving her unable to turn. Adventure would sail into a sandbar. All 3 ships lay motionless, with the tide moving them closer together. The lieutenant had ordered many of his men below deck, and would utilize them as a surprise assault if Teach and his crew would board his ship. Once the sloop was in range, Teach had his men grapple onto the ship and throw several grenades, made from powder and shots-filled bottles ignited by fuses. Teach led his men on board, and was pleased at the sight of Maynard and his few men he had beside him. Teach and his crew would point their guns to release one final barrage of bullets when Maynard's crew below deck burst out and proceeded to surprise attack Teach and his crew. The battle didn't last long, as Maynard's men outnumbered the pirates, and Jane's remaining crew would isolate Maynard and Teach and surround them. Maynard moved to fire, and Teach tried to attack, but a member of the crew slashed his throat, and following that, many of Maynard's crew proceeded to kill Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. The remaining pirates quickly surrendered and were captured. Maynard would later examine Teach's body, noting that he was shot 5 times and cut about 20 times. He also found a letter on Edward Teach from Tobias Knight, who was the Chief Justice of Secretary of the province of Carolina. Teach's corpse was thrown into the inlet, and his head hung on display from the bowsprit of Maynard's sloop as a trophy of his actions, and the reward for the death of Blackbeard could be collected. It's not surprising that the legend of Blackbeard is a terrifying one, and one that puts him as an aggressive and ruthless captain. But funny enough, Blackbeard never really harmed his captured prisoners and was always one to keep his word. Edward Teach, also known as Blackbeard, has been heavily used throughout our time in many media outlets and blockbuster movies, such as the 2011 movie Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, Assassin's Creed's Black Flag, Black Sail's television series, and even in the remake movie of Pan, Welcome to Neverland, and many more. Well, there you go, guys. Another pirate history lesson in the books, and one that was heavily requested by many of you fantastic viewers. Thank you again for watching, but before you leave, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you like content like this, hit that sub button and ding that bell to know when I upload more. Also, remember to visit Healing Nation on Discord and interact with much other Sea of Thieves fans and overall great people. Also, make sure to leave some more suggestions below, and I'll see about covering what I can. Thank you all for watching, and from me to you, make sure to heal, please heal, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.